TV history is full of almosts. Almost spin-offs, almost franchises, almost entire shows that were quietly tested during an existing series. That's how we get backdoor pilots, episodes that quietly try out a brand new concept while the main show keeps running in the background. Sometimes they work, sometimes they really don't, and sometimes they leave us wondering what could have been. So in this video, we're breaking down the Sci-Fi spin-offs that were clearly setting up their own series, but never made it past the backdoor pilot stage. All of them had enough world building, characters, and ambition to stand on their own, and yet they never did. Assignment Earth, Star Trek the original series. Before Star Trek boldly went everywhere, it briefly visited 1960s Earth. Assignment Earth introduced Gary 7, a mysterious agent sent by an alien race to quietly guide humanity away from self-destruction. Armed with futuristic tech and a black cat named Isis, Gary felt less like a Starfleet officer and more like a Cold War-era sci-fi spy. The episode was clearly designed as a backdoor pilot, meant to launch a new series about Gary and his assistant Roberta. But NBC passed, and Star Trek fans were left wondering what a grounded, Earth-based Trek spin-off might have looked like. At least the story didn't die there. The characters lived on through novels and a comic book series. The Ultimate Imposter, the $6 Million Man. Riding high on their success, the $6 Million Man briefly tried expanding the OSI with a very different kind of super agent. The Ultimate Imposter shifted focus away from Steve Austin and onto his longtime friend Joe Patton, the world's first fully computerized human. Joe had been directly uploaded with massive amounts of data, giving him instant mastery of languages, skills, and professions, making him the OSI's newest secret weapon. Everything about this episode screamed backdoor pilot, right down to the computer-style credits. ABC clearly hoped Joe Patton would headline his own techno-thriller. It never happened, though the concept was compelling enough that CBS tried it with a separate TV pilot later on. The Unknown, The Outer Limits. One of the Outer Limits' strangest near spin-offs came with The Forms of Things Unknown, which was a backdoor pilot for a proposed horror anthology called The Unknown. The episode played like a gothic nightmare. Two women murder a blackmailer, then stumble into the home of an eccentric inventor with a device that can resurrect the dead. They even shot two different endings, one for Outer Limits and one for The Unknown. The concept was eerie and stylish, but the series was ultimately passed over, leaving this episode as a chilling glimpse of what might have been. Interestingly, history repeated itself decades later. The 1995 Outer Limits revival also toyed with backdoor pilots that went nowhere, most notably Star-Crossed in Season 5, starring a pre-Firefly Nathan Fillion, along with multiple other would-be pilots in the revival's final season. Cavender is coming, the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling didn't just explore sci-fi and horror, he also tried his hand at fantasy sitcoms. Cavender is Coming introduced Harmon Cavender, a guardian angel in training who's on his last chance to earn his wings before being kicked out of heaven. This episode was lighter, goofier, and far more comedic than classic Twilight Zone, clearly aiming to launch a whimsical supernatural series. It even had a laugh track, but audiences weren't buying it. The episode is often remembered as one of the show's weakest, but it's also fascinating as proof that even Serling couldn't make every genre mashup work. Cavender never got his wings or his spin-off. Warehouse 12, Warehouse 13. Fans of Warehouse 13 still talk about this one. Season 3's episode 321 brought H.G. Wells into the spotlight as a consultant, helping Pete and Micah track down a devastating artifact that's been resurfacing across centuries. And through flashbacks to the 1890s, the episode quietly laid the groundwork for a potential prequel series. The proposed spin-off would have followed Wells in 1890s New York, scouting out a new location for the warehouse. If this backdoor pilot was any indication, it would have been ambitious, stylish, and packed with historical fun and steampunk gadgets. But sadly, it never made it past the planning stage. Second Dawn, The 100. The 100 used one of its final episodes to pitch an entire new show. Season 7's episode Anaconda served as a backdoor pilot for Second Dawn, a potential prequel set 97 years before the original series, starting right as the nuclear apocalypse wiped out the world. The episode followed the early days inside the Second Dawn bunker, introducing Callie Cadigan as she and other survivors tried to build something better from the ashes. It also added depth to Season 7's villain, Bill Cadigan, by reframing his legacy through his daughter, who clearly had spin-off lead potential. In an otherwise divisive final season, Anaconda stood out, making it especially frustrating that Second Dawn never moved forward. Green Arrow and the Canaries. Arrow nearly passed the torch with Green Arrow and the Canaries. The Season 8 episode jumped forward to a dystopian 2040, where Mia Queen had taken up her father's mantle alongside Dinah Drake and Laura Lance. The setup felt like a natural evolution of the Arrowverse. Legacy heroes, a darker future, and unresolved mysteries begging for weekly exploration. The episode functioned as a near-perfect pilot, but despite fan interest, the CW passed, leaving the future of Star City frustratingly unresolved. Interestingly, earlier in the series, Arrow flirted with another spin-off. Mark Guggenheim once hinted that the Season 2 Suicide Squad episode could have served as a backdoor pilot, but once the DC film was announced, the TV idea was scrapped entirely. Painkiller, Black Lightning. Speaking of Arrowverse, a different show in the franchise also tried its hand at a backdoor pilot. Painkiller centered on Khalil Payne and his morally complex journey as a super-enhanced assassin trying to break free from his dark past. The episode leaned heavily into action and psychological conflict. It introduced new characters, new mythology, and a darker tone than Black Lightning, all signs of a planned spin-off. But after network shakeups, the series was canceled before filming. It's now remembered as one of the most promising DC TV projects that never happened. Hawk and Dove, Titans. Early in Titans' first season, it became very clear that Hawk and Dove were being quietly positioned as spin-off leads. Introduced in Episode 2 and later expanded in Episode 9, Hank Hall and Dawn Granger brought a more grounded vigilante energy to the show. Their episodes pulled focus away from the Titans almost entirely, exploring their violent approach to justice, their complicated romance, and the emotional cost of being street-level heroes in a world full of gods and monsters. It all felt very intentional, a backdoor pilot spread across 2 episodes. But while Hawk and Dove became fan favorites and remained important to Titans, the standalone series never materialized. Honorable mentions. Before we wrap, here are a few more almost spin-offs that never quite made it. Marvel's Most Wanted was probably the closest to becoming real. Bobby Morse and Lance Hunter were introduced on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., promoted to series regulars, then written out at the end of Season 3 specifically to launch their own show. A pilot was filmed, but ultimately passed on by ABC. Rangers of the New Republic was quietly set up during The Mandalorian Season 2, positioning Cara Dune as a potential lead in a New Republic-focused spin-off. But after behind-the-scenes drama, the project was shelved entirely. Smallville flirted with a couple of spin-offs, one about Aquaman and another about the Justice League. Stranger Things fans still debate whether The Lost Sister was meant to launch an 11-centric spin-off. The Duffers deny it, but the sudden tonal shift, new characters, and standalone structure made it feel like a test run. And finally, Black Mirror's Red Mirror episodes in Season 6 sparked heavy speculation that Netflix was testing the waters for a fantasy-focused anthology spin-off. Dead Boy Detectives, Doom Patrol. And we'll end with the strangest case on the list. Doom Patrol introduced one of the most charming potential spin-offs with the episode Dead Patrol. It featured Edwin Payne and Charles Rowland, 2 teenage ghosts who decided not to move on after death and instead solve supernatural crimes together. This episode functioned as a clear backdoor pilot, setting up the Dead Boy Detectives' world, rules, and banter-heavy partnership. What makes this case especially fascinating is that the spin-off did become a full series, just not how it was originally planned or portrayed in Doom Patrol. HBO Max initially greenlit the series before later moving it to Netflix, where it ended up becoming part of the Sandman universe instead. It's a rare example of a backdoor pilot that technically failed and still somehow won. Did we miss any sci-fi backdoor pilots that absolutely deserve their own series? Drop them in the comments. If you had fun digging through these lost sci-fi side quests, check the description for full details on the episodes we talked about. Make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss more fascinating corners of television history. And head over to tvshowpilot.com for more deep dives into all your favorite shows.